Hey guys, welcome to Cheers. My name is Lee West, the pastor of Cheers Church, and today we're going to be talking about part 4 of our series on Earth's final days. And so today we're going to dive into the first part of the tribulation period, the first 3.5 years. Last week we talked about the rapture, and I believe that there, it seems to be scripture. Obviously, we could be wrong on that, but it seems to be that there is a pre-tribulation rapture of the church that takes us out before the wrath is poured out. And today and this week, we're going to be dealing with the first 3.5 years of this. So the tribulation period is covered in Revelation chapter 6 through chapters all the way through to 19. So it covers a very large portion of this. This week, we're going to deal with the first 3.5 years. Next week, we're going to deal with the second 3.5 years. And hopefully we gain some understanding of what this tribulation period is like for the church. Yes, there may be some Christians that we're seeing in this. Actually, I think that there'll be quite a few Christians actually that get saved during the tribulation period and will be with the Lord. So let's take a look at this. The scene that we're kind of laying out here is the rapture has happened, I believe, inciting total chaos around the world. The Antichrist offers a peace treaty to Israel who will bring a solution to this chaos that we're seeing and will bring peace to that Middle East region. And we see that in Daniel 9:27. But also we're seeing that Israel is operating the third temple. We're seeing that the world is suffering due to wars, famines, pestilences, and judgments unleashed by the first 5 seals being opened, Revelation chapter 6. We're also seeing during this first 3.5 years, 144,000 Jewish witnesses or evangelists that are evangelizing the world. And then we see a very interesting 2 beings called the 2 witnesses, possibly, they're giving testimony, operating at the temple, calling down fire from heaven, causing plagues actually on the earth as much as they desire, and they will be killed after the first 3.5 years. And that's in Revelation chapter 11. So let's begin with this peace treaty with Israel, because I believe that's what initiates the beginning of this 7-year tribulation period. But there's a peace treaty with Israel for the first 3.5 years. So let's start with Daniel 9:27 with the peace treaty with Israel. And I'll bring this up here on the screen. So then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. And that 1 week is part of Daniel's 70 weeks. 69 of those weeks have already been completed. And so there's 1 week left, which equals to 7 years. But in the middle of the week, 3.5 years in, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, meaning that there's going to be a break in that peace treaty. And he's going to end this where the temple in Israel, the third temple, is offering sacrifice and offering. He's going to bring an end to that. And so we're seeing right there that there's a beginning of this with a treaty, and then literally going into breaking that treaty, and which is in breaking it with the temple. Now, Daniel 7:25 says, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High. We're talking about the Antichrist here. He shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change the times and law. And there's some indication that Antichrist will actually try to change the time zones. Not sure about that, but there is some research on that. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, which is equal 1 year, and times, meaning 2 years, and a half time, half of a year. That's 3.5 years, and that's Daniel 7:25. Then Revelation 13 verse 5 says, and he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months, again, 3.5 years. So, and then Revelation 12:6 actually says the woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Again, another reference to the 3.5 years. So whether it's a time, times and a half time, or whether it's for 1 week, 42 months or 1,260 days, all referencing this 3.5 year time frame where the Antichrist is actually beginning to set up and rule and establish his kingdom and throne. So let's talk about the Antichrist. The word Antichrist comes from the word antichristos, meaning opponent of the Messiah. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin, now this is the Antichrist, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above God and all that is called God and worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple, showing himself that he is God. And this coming of this lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders. Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 and 2 says, then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. On his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast, which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority, and he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months, meaning those 3.5 years. And it's interesting here that the 7 heads, it references 7 empires. And this is found in Revelation 17. And the 10 horns were 10 nations that actually align with him. So during this period of tribulation, you're going to see that there will be 7 heads or empires, and that there will also be 10 nations that rally around the Antichrist. And Revelation 13:3 says, and I saw one of his heads, and this is empires, Revelation 17, as if it had been mortally wounded. So one of the empires being dead, and his deadly wound was healed, meaning it resurrected. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. Out of there's 7 heads here, 7 empires, but I'm going to list here, show you kind of what they are. The first empire is the Egyptian Empire, but remember that what Daniel or what Revelation is saying is that there's a wound or a deadly wound to this empire. So, but it was resurrected. So we have to kind of look at these empires and say which one was dead, and maybe that gives us an indication which one actually is going to be resurrected. So the 7 empires, one is the Egyptian Empire. Well, Egypt is still around. The second one is the Assyrian Empire, and Syria still exists. The third one is the Media-Persian Empire. Well, that's Iran. Iran still exists. And the 5th one is the Grecian Empire. Greece still exists. And the Roman Empire, and Rome still exists. But the 6th one here is the Babylonian Empire. That one is dead, and that's out of Iraq. So that could actually be resurrected. And the 7th one would be the iron and clay, which could indicate, something around the democracy and Islam actually coming together. But not only one of these empires was actually dead or mortally wounded, and that's the Babylonian Empire. So it could be that he will raise up this Babylonian Empire during that tribulation period. And it's thought that the Antichrist would rule from that place, which would be Babylon or Iraq, during the first 3.5 years. Because then things change, and he starts going in and starts conquering different stuff, takes Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia, and then heads north, which could be at the time at the 3.5 years where he actually goes in and heads north to attack Jerusalem and takes over the temple. Which actually happens. So Revelation chapter 6, verse 2 says, and I looked and behold a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. Now it's interesting here that the Muslims teach that this is their last end time leader called Mahdi, and Mahdi will appear at the end of days riding upon a white horse. The Mahdi will kill by beheading any Jews and Christians who don't convert, and the Mahdi will rule for 7 or 10 years, according to Islamic scholars. Well, what does the Antichrist actually do? Okay, so number one, the Antichrist rises as a leader of peace and initiates a peace treaty with Israel. Number two, Antichrist resurrects an ancient empire, maybe Babylon, the mortal wound that is now healed. Number three, Antichrist takes over 3 nations during this time frame leading up to the second 3.5 years. Those nations are Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia. And then he heads north to conquer Jerusalem. This is found in Daniel 11, verse 43. Antichrist then takes over Jerusalem, sits in the temple of God, requires all people to worship him. Number 5, the Antichrist goes out to make war with the saints, beheading them is the means of death. And number 6, Antichrist will initiate a mark that is supposed to be on the hand or the forehead to control the citizens. And number 7, Antichrist will be destroyed at the Lord's second coming at the end of the 7-year tribulation. Now, we talked about the temple, the third temple being rebuilt, and there's a lot of buzz around that. And some people think, oh, it's never going to be rebuilt. That's not the plan. But then others are like, yes, it will be. It's interesting that when I've done the research that I've done, it looks and appears that, yes, the third temple will be built, plus the scriptures that say that the Antichrist will end the offering and sacrifice in the temple, and he will sit in the temple as God when he takes over Jerusalem. So it does seem like the temple is alive and active during this first 3.5 years, and even the last 3.5 years. Well, here's some developments for that. The reforming of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the highest Jewish legal tribunal in ancient Israel. And in October of 2004, in Tiberias, Israel, several rabbis launched a new Sanhedrin. Well, the school of Levites, Rabbi Ha-Kohen, founder, building models and teaching sacrifices. He's already building models and teaching sacrifices. The Temple Institute there is working on the third temple. They began by building small vessels and trumpets. They began also to sew garments for the priest and the Levites. They're doing that now. Interesting. They made a copy of the menorah, which is displayed in the Jewish section, and they are continually working on other items. So very interesting that they're already in place. And plus, they just put out a video that is called People Get Ready. And it's all about the third temple being rebuilt. So it does seem as though it's going in that direction. Plus, depending on when you're watching this video, but right now, about 2 weeks ago, 5 red heifers actually were shipped to Israel. The first time red heifers had landed on the Israel ground in 2,000 years. So very interesting, because the red heifers are needed to consecrate the priests prior to them actually doing any work in the temple. So they have to use the ashes of the red heifer, and it's got to be very specific, and the red heifers have got to be perfect. And literally 5 were sent to Israel a couple weeks ago. So very interesting developments in that. Now, during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, we see that the first 5 seals are opened. So I'm going to go through them briefly here. Seal number 1 is the white horse. It's a conquering spirit. This, I believe, is indicating of the Antichrist that's coming to conquer and to go about conquering things. And Revelation 6:2 says that I looked and behold, a white horse who sat on it, had a bow, crown was given him, and he went out conquering and to conquering. Seal number 2 is the red horse, and that is peace is taken from earth and people kill one another. So that's war and chaos. That's found in Revelation 6, verse 4. And the third seal is the black horse, found in Revelation 6, verse 6. And that's a food crisis or a famine that's happening. It says, I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. So we're talking about a famine here, a very large food issue or crisis that is going on, that's unleashed by the black horse in seal number 3. Seal number 4 is the pale horse. It's the killing with sword, hunger, death, and by animals. And I mean, this is talking about 1/4 of the earth. It's found in Revelation 6, verse 8. So 1/4 of the earth is actually killed off. Now, I believe that the rapture is going to take away a lot of people. obviously before this happens, but right now there's about 8 billion people on earth. A fourth of that is 2 billion people. That's a lot of people that would die. But a rapture, I believe, is going to take out some of that, but still a fourth of those that are remaining is quite a lot of people that are going to die from hunger and death and animals and the sword. The fifth seal is the cry of the martyrs during this time that have actually, they missed the rapture, and literally they are becoming aware of the fact that, wait a minute, I missed something. God is real. Jesus is real. I'm going to serve him. And they're going to be martyred for their faith. And this is the cry of the martyrs for seal number 5. And that's found in Revelation chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. And the world is suffering during this time due to wars, famines, pestilences, and judgments unleashed by the first seals being open. And this is one of the reasons why I think that there's going to be a pre-rapture prior to the first 3.5 years, a pre-tribulation rapture, is because of all these things that are going on. And I believe that God has not appointed us to wrath in the few of those scriptures that we read, that he would protect his people from these things. So the first 3.5 years, though it's a peace treaty with Israel in the Middle East, may be quiet, there is quite a lot of stuff going on here that is not good. Famines, pestilences, judgments, killing, wars, all kinds of stuff. A fourth of the world is being killed. That is massive stuff. Now, also during this time, the first 3.5 years, is what we see is 144,000 people. And they're called witnesses or servants of God. They're Jewish evangelists as we see it. Let me read this to you. Revelation chapter 7, verses 3 and 4, saying, "Do not harm the earth and the sea or the trees till we have sealed the servants." The word servants there is indication of what they are and how they act and believe. Seal the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. 144,000 of the tribes of Israel. So these are Jews that are being sealed by God for a purpose. And they're called servants of God. It's interesting that they're protected during the tribulation. And we can find this in Revelation 14. I'll just read this to you. Verse 1, it says, "Then I looked and behold the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000. So I believe we're talking about the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, meaning the second coming of the Lord at this point. This is after the 7 years. And here the 144,000 are standing with him. So they have been sealed and protected during this tribulation period. Other messages that we do in the next coming weeks that will show even more of this protection. And verse 2 says, "And I heard a voice," it's Revelation 14, verse 2, "and I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters, and the voice of loud thunder, and heard the sound of harpists playing. They sang a song before the throne, before the living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth." These are the ones who were not defiled with women. So it says they were virgins. So these are men that are virgins that they're not married. They've not defiled themselves with women. These are the ones who follow the Lamb. So they are Christians. They are serving Jesus during this first 3.5 years, actually during the whole 7-year tribulation period. And it says these were redeemed from among men, being first fruits of God and to the Lamb, and their mouth was found no deceit, meaning they were saying good things. They were saying righteous things, Jesus things, God things, holy things, for they were without fault before the throne of God. So what we find here with the 144,000 is they were virgin Jews. They followed the Lamb. No deceit is found in their mouth. They were servants of God with the Father's name written on their forehead. They were protected from the wrath. And they were Jewish witnesses. They share the gospel of Jesus with those in the tribulation, and thousands come to know the Lord. And listen to this. This is a result. So Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 through 10 is a result of the 144,000 preaching the gospel during the tribulation period. And it says, "After these things I looked, and behold," let's see, I'll bring this up so you can see it. and looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, tongues, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Then Revelation chapter 7, verse 13 and 14, it says, then one of the elders answered and saying to me, Who are these arrayed in white robes? And where do they come from? And I said to him, Sir, you know. So he said to me, These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. I mean, we're talking about a great multitude that have come out of the tribulation, standing before God. These are martyrs. These are people who received Jesus during the tribulation, I believe, from the preaching of the 144,000, and they literally have been killed, and they're with the Lord. So there's a great harvest taking place. And as I kept reading down in Revelation 14, it's interesting that God is releasing angels with the gospel message. And I believe that a lot of times when angels are moving, it's done through people. So the angels come, they release things, and then we see it in the natural, but it's not actually, we don't actually see the angels or hear the angels doing what they're doing. So in Revelation 14, verses 6 and 11, I'll just read this. It says, Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having an everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth. So here's a gospel message being preached on the earth during this tribulation period. And it says to every nation. It means every nation is going to hear the gospel. Interesting, because that's one of the last end time things, is that every nation will hear the gospel before the Lord's second coming. So here, every nation, every tribe, every tongue, and people. It means every single person is going to be able to hear the gospel message on earth. And the angel saying with a loud voice in verse 7, Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. So I believe the 144,000 are given this ability to preach the everlasting gospel. The angels are bringing that message. They're releasing that to the 144,000 to preach. And the 144,000 are actually saying, fear God and give glory to him. This is to all the people during the tribulation period. They're getting the gospel message preached to them. And it says, as judgment come, and worship him. So they're saying to worship God who made heaven and earth. Then another angel in verse 8 says, Babylon is fallen the great city, because she has made nations drink of the wine of the wrath for fornication. So that's another thing that is being announced. But then a third angel comes and says, if anyone worships the beast, and I believe, again, this is through the 144,000, they're saying if anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of indignation. So there's a warning. The people in the tribulation are getting a warning from the 144,000. Do not accept the mark of the beast. Do not take and worship his image. Don't do these things. Worship God. And there's going to be a whole lot of people that follow them. And because it said a great multitude who came out of the great tribulation. So a great harvest is going to take place during the tribulation. Many people are going to become saved and followers of Jesus and the Lord. They may be martyred and killed for their faith during this time, especially during the last 3.5 years, because literally, if you didn't worship the image, you were killed of the beast. And if you didn't take the mark of the beast, then you can't buy or sell. So there's a good chance there's going to be a lot of people that do not make it during the tribulation, but that are Christian and they will live with the Lord. So Ephesians 1:13, God always seals his people. And so Ephesians 1:13 says, in him you also trusted, after you heard the word of truth. Let me bring this up. I like to bring up scriptures if I can. In him you also trusted, after you heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, in whom also having believed, you were sealed with the Holy Spirit of promise. So Jesus is sealing the 144,000, but he sealed us. And that's good news. Ephesians 4:30 says, and do not grieve the Holy Spirit by whom you were sealed. So God always seals his people. And the seal is for protection, for ownership. The word seal there is literally a stamp, and it's for security or preservation, to authenticate, interesting, and to establish ownership. Well, now, after the 144,000 are with them, there's another thing that is happening here, and it's two witnesses, two spiritual beings that are operating in the flesh on earth, and they have signs and wonders and powers. And so let's just take a look at this that's going on, because we've got this great revival that's happening with 144,000, but we also have this the two witnesses that are coming up, and they're pretty interesting as well. So Revelation chapter 11, let me read some of that just at the beginning. Verse 1 says, then I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood saying, rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there. And verse 3 says, and I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days. So that's 3.5 years. So we're seeing that the two witnesses also have 3.5 years here. And that's the first 3.5 years that they will be prophesying during this time. Now, it also says in verse 3, they're clothed in sackcloth. And I'm going to read verse 4 and through 6. And it says, these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands standing before the God of the earth. And if anyone wants to harm them, fire proceeds from their mouth and devours their enemies. And if anyone wants to harm them, he must be killed in this manner. These have power to shut heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy. And they have the power over waters to turn them to blood and to strike the earth with all plagues as often as they desire. So this is kind of a wild scene here. It's, so let's just recap. This is what the two witnesses do. They're in the temple of God, standing, and there's worshipers are there. The Gentiles indicating a future time, will tear down the holy city for 3.5 years. But the witnesses will have power to prophesy for 3.5 years. Fire proceeds from their mouth, so they can't be harmed. They have power to shut up the heavens so it doesn't rain. They have power to turn water to blood. And they have power to strike the earth with plagues as often as they desire. So think about this. This is the first real supernatural beings that the world probably has ever seen, where you're looking at somebody and they're able to have fire come out of their mouth. I mean, we haven't seen that. They're able to call fire down from heaven. We've not seen that. I mean, the Israelites saw that maybe with Elijah, but we've not seen that. That's just something that's really different, And then literally these 3.5 years, they're doing this work, and then they're killed by the Antichrist, which that allows the Antichrist followers to say, man, this guy's more powerful than these guys who were from God. And so this is really God, and we're going to worship him, and see the deception can fall into place there. Now, Revelation 11, verses 7, I'll bring this up here. It says, when they had finished their testimony, these are the two witnesses, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit will make war against them and overcome them and kill them. So we know they're gonna die. And then they have 3.5 days that they're on the ground. They're in Jerusalem. No one wants to bury them or touch them. After 3.5 days, the breath of God comes into them, and God says, come up. And they literally ascend into heaven, and their enemies all watch them. And their enemies rejoice because these two witnesses were able to call plagues down as much as they wanted, and they tormented the people. Now, there's a lot of speculation on who those two witnesses are. And, there's some interesting things that it possibly could be Elijah and Enoch, because both are Old Testament prophets. Well, these witnesses are prophets. Both had never died. And remember, in Hebrews 9:27 says it's appointed unto us to die once. Well, Elijah and Enoch are the only two people that have never died physically. Elijah also called down fire from heaven, which is what they do. Elijah also closed the heavens for 42 months, which they do. And Enoch prophesied about the Lord's return with judgment, which they prophesy. So this leads us now into Satan being cast down from heaven as we go into the last 3.5 years of this tribulation period. The influences the Antichrist to break the treaty with Israel and begins war with the saints. So I've got a few discussion questions here, but it's really just around the topics we discussed. So what are your thoughts, number one, about the Antichrist? Number two, what are your thoughts about the third temple being rebuilt? Number three, what are your thoughts on the 144,000 Jews? Number four, what are your thoughts on the two witnesses? And number five, just what are your overall thoughts on the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period? Well, again, I hope you have a great discussion today, and I hope this has stirred some things for you, and you're also finding comfort through this series on Earth's final days. Well, have a great discussion today. We'll see you in the next video. God bless.